Even though it was met with substantial pushback from the agriculture community, the recent Make America Healthy Again, or MAHA report, was an aha moment that our food system will be changing in one way, shape, or form. One expert has seen this coming for years and has helped farmers navigate and prepare for a different mindset towards our food and how we grow it. We'll visit with him next here on the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast.
Hi, I'm Brian Baldridge, Director of the Ohio Department of Agriculture and 7th Generation Farmer. H2 Ohio enrollment is open in the Western Lake Erie Basin through August 15th. Join the thousands of farmers who are already enrolled and receive incentives for implementing best management practices on your farm that improve water quality. Together, we can make a lasting difference. Contact your local soil and water office to enroll or visit h2.ohio.gov for more information.
At AgCredit, we've been proudly providing support and financing for agriculture in rural Ohio for generations. As a local farmer-owned cooperative, we value our members and work to supply the best service possible while offering competitive products and solutions. Solutions that support the next generation getting started, ones that help operations grow, and others to aid with transitions. To apply online or find the location nearest you, visit us at agcredit.net. AgCredit, committed to agriculture, committed to you.
As many Ohio farmers endure a third year of pressure on net farm income, a lack of market clarity, and increased commodity competitions globally, what priority sustainability initiatives and programs should farmers have in their business plan? A pretty heavy question, but something that farmers need to consider not just for the next couple of years, but for the next generation or two. To talk more about it, Brett Scotto, CEO of Idealist Innovation, and Adam Sharp, Executive Vice President of Ohio Farm Bureau. Great to see you both. Welcome to the podcast.
Great to see you, Ty.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Ty. Appreciate it.
So, Brett, this all stems from an article in the May-June Our Ohio magazine called The Great Unraveling: Sustainability, Resiliency, and the Future of Agri-Food. This has been something that you've had your eye on for a number of years. Why did you start taking a look at this particular issue?
Well, I think it's important for farmers to understand where it's all headed. I mean, they have to make some pretty significant operational decisions, investments, as they think about the way they're going to approach production, the technology they're going to use, the programs they're part of. And I think if we don't have a view over the horizon, we could very much get off track. And I think the goal for me, at least in that article, was to lay out some of the big picture macro trends that are going to structurally change agriculture in my mind. And I want farmers, to think a little bit about what that means to their operation and their assets and how they navigate over the next decade.
All part of what you do there at Idealist Innovation as the CEO. Tell us about your company and what you do as a whole.
Yes, I'm really excited about Idealist Innovation. It's a new venture, as you may know, and it's really built on my work over the last 25 years in agriculture, the strategic intelligence that I have provided and that we did in previous ventures. And now it's all culminating in this firm that's focused on augmenting and really the better word is amplifying the voice of the farmer and cultivating that into innovation that helps make them stronger. And we're doing that through an alliance. It's very intelligence based, as all of my ventures are. And it focuses a lot on really understanding how the macro trends will impact the operating environment for farmers and ranchers, what their opportunities or challenges are in that environment, and how we can help get them the right tools and solutions that allow them to be successful. And do that through organizations that they already work with and trust. So we're building an alliance of like-minded organizations to help deliver that innovation. But it really begins with the voice of the farmer in aligning ag innovation to their needs, not solutions in search of problems, which we often find ourselves dealing with. And so it's a really exciting time. We have a tremendous team assembled. The work has begun. And in fact, in a couple weeks or so, we'll release our future state report, which is a more detailed look at what we think is ahead for farmers. And we've already been traveling around the nation, getting on farms, and certainly some here in Ohio, and digging in on what farmers are contending with and how we can help bring the right solutions to the farm gate.
Adam, the food system has been in hyper focus here over the last couple of months with this new administration, and we have worked with Brett on this topic for a number of years. How is what we learned from him used as we share information with
Yeah.
our members across the state.
Yeah, this is what we really like a lot about Brett's work and his group's work is that, one of the reasons why we asked him to do the article that he did in the Our Ohio magazine is that, as an independent group that looks, kind of deeply at the industry of agriculture and where the industry is headed, they also have all this, very tight network with the ag industry broadly, the whole food chain network, and not just production ag, right, but across ag business into the consumer. They have a very broad look. So they're able to step aside a little bit, right, and look over the horizon, as Brett says a lot of times in his presentations, is they're looking over that horizon and using intelligence to look out there a little bit further of what's happening and what trends are. And these are trends that sometimes, right, might turn out to really be nothing at all, or they may change the entire industry, right? Like you just don't know, but there are things you got to be aware of. So we appreciate the work that they do because they're raising these kind of issues. We at Farm Bureau, how it ties in nicely with us is we're on it right now, right? So we have our, every county is doing their policy development meeting. We're having our annual meeting and we're working through the issues of the day. And typically we're looking at the issues of the day, right? We're looking a little ahead, but not a long way ahead, right? We're talking about things that are happening now that people are fired up about right now, things that are hitting our bottom line right now. And we might look a little bit down that line, right? Like we might be shaping policy that you're going to see legislation in or regulation in the next several years, but we're not looking over the horizon typically too far. That's why their work has been so nicely, so nicely dovetails into ours because it allows us to look further down the path and do so through an independent lens and not just through our lens, but hearing what they hear from the industry broadly, not just the production ag piece of it. So that's the very helpful part for how it works together nicely for us. And what I've seen is our people enjoy hearing about these topics. It stirs them up. It gets a lot of questions being asked, and that's exactly what we like to do in our policy development process. So anytime we can kind of feed that discussion, I think is a good thing.
So, Brett, let's dig into this Our Ohio article, The Great Unraveling. You talk about us being in the midst of a truly revolutionary time in American agriculture. Explain what you mean by the Great Unraveling and what you mean by this revolution in the food system across the country.
Yeah, I think, like Adam said, it's really easy to get caught up in the near battle, the close battle, the things that are happening today. And I think it's important to consider what the deep battle will bring to our industry. And I do think that we are in this time of really systemic and structural change in the industry. It's easy to get lulled into these cycles that we've been through and just think this is just another cycle. I do think that is part of it, but I think that there is a real reset that's happening on the demand side and the operating side that has to be contemplated if we want to have long-term success for our farming operations. When we look at global population and affluence, when we think about geopolitics, when we think about human health, there are all these big macro drivers of change that are going to change the demand picture. And then there's factors that are going to impact operating environments. Certainly, as we think about climate, as we think about things like technology and who owns the farm, and the cost and increase of capital and how we use our data, there's all these things that farmers are dealing with. And it's been my contention for a long time that we have to do more as an industry to help them. And Farm Bureau is obviously one of those organizations that's on the front lines of really empowering farmers and ranchers and being their voice and their advocate. But we have to think bigger about directionally where it's all headed and how we can begin to help them not only deal with the near battle, but deal with the battles that are ahead. And that's the construct of the article and certainly some of the topics I'm looking forward to talking about today.
And Adam, you mentioned it that farmers and our members in particular, on the short term, they have a lot of thoughts, a lot of concerns. We talk about policy for the next year or two. We talk about crop rotations for the next year or two. Of course, succession planning things a little bit longer term. But where do you think our members are as far as thinking 10, 15, 20 years down the road as far as the way they farm on their particular operation?
Yeah, I think this is that fun, but also very uncomfortable, place where these conversations take us. And this is again what I like and what we appreciate about Brett's work is that stir up those conversations. It doesn't mean that you like or agree with a certain trend, but just getting them on the table and getting an unbiased perspective, like they provide, of saying, hey, you need to pay attention to all these things because you just don't know where they're gonna, what they're gonna mean for you, and you should start thinking about how you're gonna manage them in your business. How are you gonna deal with these different dynamics that are coming at you? When we talk about, and one of the things that he talks about in the article is, that future of sustainability, and we look at the bills that are being introduced. We look at different administrations as they're looking at sustainability practices and programs, whether they're state programs or federal programs or voluntary or through businesses, private businesses that are offered to farmers. What is all that going to mean for our members? And I get those questions from our members right now. They're signed up in certain programs. Is the program still going to be funded? Do we care if it's funded? Is it driving things the wrong way? So energy policy is another one of those spaces. The future of risk management is another one of those spaces. Land use management in Ohio, right? It's a big, big deal. Farmland preservation is part of that. Energy and solar is part of that. External threats, high path, right? We saw the impact to our poultry industry here in Ohio this past year from that, from disease and from an external threat. We saw the headlines just in the past week, where a couple Chinese nationals, right, brought a fungus into the United States that could cause significant harm to our crops. So, you got a series of these types of threats and issues out there that that it's good for us to be talking about. And it's kind of funny. Some of our members sometimes, well, gosh, they're uncomfortable if we disagree about even these trends and issues. It's like we don't have to agree on them. It's just recognizing the vast array of these things that are out there that you need to be thinking about and talking about. And ultimately, we'll come up with a policy of where we want to be. But every time we open this conversation every year with 65,000 members and ask for opinions, we got a few different opinions out there, right? So it's okay to have different opinions about where it might go or what we might do about it now, but we should start talking about it now. That's the important part. But we'll eventually get to a consensus of where we need to be.
No matter what generation farmer you are, the next one is always the most important. The Ohio Soybean Council is focused on the future of your operation. It's not just a checkoff contribution. It's an investment you can count on for your farm, your bottom line, and your future. Ohio Soybean Council. Invested in your future.
Brett, our president, Bill Patterson, has taken a little catchphrase from Nationwide, life comes at you fast, and he says that government comes at you fast. Over the past several months, the Trump administration has brought more change and perhaps more uncertainty faster than any time in modern American history. I want to talk about trade and policy in a bit, but let's start with MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. We saw that come out from the administration. We saw some pushback from the agriculture sector. What do you make of how human health is playing in our food system reinvention?
Yeah, I would argue, Ty, that RFK and MAHA are the latest chapter in something that has been building for a long time. And the simple fact is that we built this incredible food system that really took care of the caloric needs of our country and the world in a way that that was history changing. And if you look at the food insecurity around the world has continued to be reduced, but there's been some unintended consequences from that, from not only that approach to the food system, but also to just culture and the way that we've kind of navigated the last couple decades. And today, there's a real health crisis in the United States. 40% obesity, 2/3 have chronic related diseases. We have about a 13-year lifespan gap between living longevity and how we live in a way that's healthy and allows us to achieve our goals. And so there's this growing realization, and has been for a while, that we need to rethink how we're eating. And I think this MAHA movement, while some think it's very informed, some think it's very misinformed, I think it's emblematic of something that's really under the surface, which is people want to be healthier. People want to have longevity and they want to be able to achieve their goals. And they're starting to realize that the way in which they're eating is impacting their ability to achieve those things. And we've built this tremendous healthcare system. And if we're sick, we're in the right place. But I would argue that the metrics on our health in trying to avoid getting sick fall pretty far behind a lot of other developed countries. And so I think this is gonna take lots of forms, but I think it's well intended. And at the end of the day, it's okay to think through these issues and to debate them, as Adam said, and to consider what they mean for agriculture. Some of these things will be flashes in the pan, others will be large structural changes. But I think in general, when you look at a macro trend, which I spend a lot of time thinking about, and you think about population, which will largely peak in the next decade globally, right around 9 billion. We have some countries that are already declining in population. When we think about consumption, 75% of the changes in consumption will come from affluence, not from population growth or decline. And when populations are more affluent, they move up the nutritional ladder and they want something different. And that is what they're asking for. And that's what we quite frankly need here in America. And so my message to American agriculture is it's going to be okay because you're part of the solution. They can't do it without you. And at the end of the day, we have to have our voice heard in that process, of course. But we also are the only ones that can really make it work. And so I think at the end of the day, they're going to come back to us, no matter what they put out in a position paper, and realize that American farmers and ranchers are the foundation of our national security, the foundation of our food system, and have to be part of the solution for human health going forward.
Adam, as an organization, how do we work through some of those challenges, particularly when it comes to the Maha report?
Yeah. It raises, Brett said this quite well, but it raises some perfectly fine conversations that have been brewing for quite some time that need to happen and play out. And when you're talking about diet, and your choices, right, of what you're going to eat, right, what you're going to choose when you go to the grocery store, what's available for you at the grocery store, your personal selections. There's plenty of conversation there. There's plenty of conversation around exercise, less screen time for kids, and more activity. There's plenty of good questions that get raised in this conversation. But there's also the kind of I think the concern falls into the underpinnings of questioning the entire food system in this country, right? And that's kind of somewhere over here in that space that makes people nervous in the food and ag industry, right? In particular, I hear that as part of it is, well, it's fine to have a number of these conversations, but be careful not to cause kind of permanent damage, if you will, to the trust in our regulatory system of food safety in the country. And that's a good question, right? I mean, that's part of what's being discussed here is there's certainly folks who are making arguments that we should make changes in our food system, in our food regulatory system, and others who say, if you change anything, you're going to disrupt it. So I think that's part of what's got to play out here a little bit, and talk about science and talk about real data and talk about what we really do know, and try to stick with that as best as you can in the places where you feel very comfortable with it. But some of these other conversations are still going to happen. And they're going to happen one way or another. They're going to happen. As Brett said, these trends have been going on for a while. This isn't new. It's taken a new form in some regards, but it's not new. So some of this has got to play out. When I talk to Farm Bureau members about this, it is interesting when I get. We certainly have members that have a lot of opinions about MAHA in different parts of the MAHA pieces and report. And I would say they're not all on the same page. I mean, I hear a fundamental, we don't want to disrupt our, the system we've created here overall, as far as the production ability, the science-based, system. We don't want to disrupt that, but we're happy to have conversations, though, about food choice and about contents and exercise and a lot of things. So it is kind of interesting. I get kind of varied opinion amongst our members when it gets into some of these conversations. When if you start with the fundamental, we support agriculture and food in this country, don't want to destroy or disrupt that system, but it is okay to open up a lot of these conversations. So it'd be interesting to see where some of this keeps going. We've seen some of the report that came out here recently has stirred up a lot of conversation, and we'll see what happens next, because right now the conversation is supposed to move more to a policy perspective here over the summer. So we'll see what happens with the policy conversation, which directions that take, whether that becomes even more concerning, or if it fits in a space that people are much more comfortable in having conversations about. We'll see.
We cannot have this conversation without talking about sustainability. And Brett, you mentioned it in your piece. The word has taken on so many forms and meanings over the years. What's next for sustainability, and how will innovation play a role in it?
Well, I think they're synergistic, first of all. As we innovate, we get better at producing more efficiently and at having less negative impacts on whatever that may be, soil health, environment, communities. And so I think, as we continue to innovate and move the needle in terms of our operational proficiency and efficiency, we're going to naturally become more sustainable. And that sustainability has to be in alignment with economic sustainability. But having said all that, I don't think many farmers were making changes on their farm to be more sustainable as a result of some government policy. I think it was consistent with their vision of how to be competitive, how to have access to the right markets that they want, how to differentiate their product, how to do things that are good for their operation. I think that'll continue to be true as we think about changes that may take place at the federal level between the Biden administration and the Trump administration, and maybe the defunding of some of those sustainability programs. I don't know that it'll have a material impact on farmers and ranchers' interest in that, and it certainly won't have a material impact on consumer packaged goods companies and their interest on connecting with consumer values. The consumer value set hasn't changed. Just because there's a new president doesn't mean that hundreds of millions of consumers suddenly stopped caring about the environment or stopped caring about how their food was produced. And you see company after company continuing on in their initiatives. And quite frankly, farmers and ranchers are part of that supply chain. And so while we will have ups and downs in our government policy, thank God for the Farm Bureau, right? They can get out there and make sure that we're having rational discussions in Washington and Columbus and throughout the country. But my message to farmers and ranchers is control the variables you can control. These macro level things are going to happen. We need to consider what they mean to our operation, but we can spend a lot of emotional energy focused on things that are way outside of our control, and in the process of that, neglect the variables that are in our control that make us stronger and more resilient. And so that's a fundamental message that I've been trying to deliver is take control of your operation, your efficiency, your metrics, your financial data, and really do all you can do to maximize your opportunities in the future state. By
Adam
building
was
that strength and by building that resiliency, then you're more able to weather the ebbs and flows of policy, the ebbs and flows of politics. And the last thing I'll say is we don't want an industry that's predicated on government intervention. We want an industry that's predicated on market interest and demand, and we want to meet that demand. And I would argue we have to continue on this transformation path as an industry in order to meet that demand.
Adam, as we wrap up, besides conversations like this one, how are we preparing our members for what's next in this ever-changing food system?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is making sure that we're lifting up these kind of issues as much as we frankly can to our members to be having hopefully a good, healthy, and then obviously a productive conversation about where we want to head to. In the sustainability one there that that Brett was just talking about is a great example. Does it when we have these conversations, it's kind of fun to listen to our members. Hey, cut to the chase. And the chase is an example. I heard a really good comment made by one of our members on the delegate floor this past year when it got into sustainability conversation. And their comment was, does the program align with my profitable business model? If it aligns and I can see benefits to me, whether it's through profit or improving my soil or whatever, conserving water that I'm using on my farm, whatever it is, then yeah, I could, that aligns with what I can control and it helps me. I'll sign up for that. If not, then maybe you want to reconsider it. Same thing with eminent domain. Carbon capture. We're talking about carbon capture, as one of these many, many, many programs out there. And well, what's the side? What else happens when you sign up for a program like that? Well, then you get into some other questions, of what's control of your property and things that surface and subsurface. You get into a series of questions around these things. So so having that healthy discussion is the key part. That's what Farm Bureau loves to do, right? We push every county every year. What are those issues? I appreciate Brett's comment there of spend time on what you can control, right, and the things that you can manage. Don't waste a lot of emotional issue in spaces you can't. That's very good advice, I think, for all of our members as we have our policy conversations, because we certainly have a trend to veer sometimes over here into some very emotional issues that we can't control and that maybe aren't in our wheelhouse at all. But we might have a strong opinion about it, but it's not something that we're going to be able to focus our attention on and make a change in. Whereas we know there's a lot of spaces we can. And so, but still putting all these things on the table and letting our members sort through them has been our way. And I like to always say, and I'll end it with this, Ty, is, on the delegate floor, the delegates will get it right. All of our voting Farm Bureau members will get the policy right. It might not be right the first time, but it might take a year or two of evolving it, but they'll get it right. And they'll land where they want to land with the majority of those folks after they work through it. And I think that's a lesson we could all learn these days, right? You can disagree without being disagreeable. And you can talk through these issues, and you'll land in the right place if you keep your mind open and have a good conversation about it.
Brett, final words.
My only advice to farmers and ranchers: really take the time to work on the business and not just in the business. Take the time to consider what these macro trends mean to your operation, where your opportunity is, and focus on the variables and the things you can control. And the last thing I'll say is, don't ever forget that you're foundational to who we are as a nation, foundational to our national security. And we need to continue to all work together as an industry, as a Farm Bureau, as an agricultural family to help folks be successful. I mean, we need you to be successful. We need you to be able to meet the needs of the future. And we have to have these conversations to make that happen.
Brett
So thank
Scotto,
you for this opportunity.
CEO of Idealist Innovation, joining us on the podcast. Brett is also, as he mentions in his article, a proud Franklin County Farm Bureau member.
I am.
The Great Unraveling: Sustainability, Resiliency, and the Future of Agri-Food in the May-June issue of Our Ohio. Really appreciate you both taking time for us, Brett Scotto and Adam Sharp, Executive Vice President of Ohio Farm Bureau. Thank you so much for the insights. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ty.
Thanks, Ty. Appreciate it.
Find previous podcasts at ohiofarmbureau.org and search podcasts.